In the heart of the Italian peninsula, where the Tiber River flows quietly and peacefully, a small city emerged that would one day change the fate of the world: Rome. But the early Rome was not yet the magnificent empire that would later conquer continents. Everything began with a small city-state, and over time, through bloody conflicts, the city entered a new phase of its political life: the Roman Republic. Our story begins with the end of the monarchy and the dawn of this remarkable republic. In the 6th century BCE, Rome was ruled by kings, some of whom had roots in the Etruscan people, a civilized tribe in northern Italy that deeply influenced the culture and architecture of early Rome. The last king of Rome, Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, was a tyrant known for his cruelty and injustice. Ancient sources like Livy recount that his son, Sextus, ignited public outrage by assaulting Lucretia, the wife of a Roman nobleman. This event became the spark that lit the flames of rebellion. In 509 BCE, the Roman nobles, led by Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, revolted. The people and the aristocracy, united, overthrew the king and swore an oath never to allow monarchy to rule Rome again. This moment marked the beginning of what would later be called the Roman Republic. But what did republic mean? For the Romans, res publica meant the public affair, a government not in the hands of a single individual, but shared among collective institutions. The new system was built on a balance of powers: the consuls, the Roman Senate, and the popular assemblies. Each year, 2 consuls were elected. These high-ranking officials commanded the army and oversaw executive affairs. But their term lasted only 1 year to prevent excessive concentration of power. Alongside them, the Roman Senate, composed of elites and patrician families, held advisory and legislative roles. Yet we must remember that this republic was initially a tool for the aristocracy. The common people, the plebeians, had little share in power. Nevertheless, this new system, despite its flaws, promised a fundamental change. There was no more lifelong monarchy. It was a bold experiment, one that could fail and plunge Rome into chaos, or lay the foundations for an unrivaled power. At this stage, Rome was still a small city-state. Its population likely did not exceed a few tens of thousands, and its territory extended no more than a few kilometers. Yet enemies and challenges loomed: neighboring tribes, the threat of the Etruscans, and even internal rebellions. The young republic had to prove it could endure. In these early years, a fundamental principle of the Roman Republic took shape. If a great danger threatened the state, absolute power could be temporarily entrusted to one man, a dictator. But this dictatorship was limited to 6 months, after which power had to be relinquished. This solution allowed Rome to act unitedly in crises without reverting to monarchy. With the fall of the king, Rome not only transformed its political structure, but also forged a new identity for itself. The Romans were no longer subjects. They were citizens of a republic. With the fall of the monarchy and the dawn of the republic, Rome found itself in a fragile state. On one hand, the aristocratic families, known as the Patricians, held the reins of power. On the other, the common people, the plebeians, felt excluded from the new system. This tension gradually evolved into one of the most significant conflicts in Roman history: the struggle of the orders, the clash between patricians and plebeians. In the beginning, All key positions in the Republic were held exclusively by patricians. The consuls, the Senate, and even the office of dictator were all filled by members of the noble families. Though the plebeians made up the bulk of the army and the city's labor force, they had no say in major decisions. This injustice led them to gradually push for greater rights and political power. In the early years of the Republic, social uprisings erupted. The most famous of these was the secession of the plebs around 494 BCE. In protest against inequality, the plebeians abandoned the city and camped on the Mons Sacer, a hill outside Rome. Without their labor and soldiers, the city was paralyzed, forcing the patricians to compromise. The result of this pressure was the creation of a new office, the tribune of the plebs. The tribunes were representatives of the common people and held a crucial power, veto. If the Senate or consuls passed a law harmful to the plebeians, a tribune could cry, "Veto, I forbid it," and block it. This veto right was a political revolution within the Republic. For the first time, the common people had a real tool to defend their interests. Yet Rome was not only grappling with internal tensions. External enemies also lurked around this small city-state. The exiled king, Tarquin the Proud, still dreamed of reclaiming his throne. He sought refuge at the court of the Etruscan king Lars Porsena and attempted to retake Rome. This attack occurred around 508 BCE, bringing Rome to the brink of collapse. But in these critical moments, legendary tales emerged that became symbols of Roman patriotism. Horatius Cocles, the soldier who, according to legend, held his ground on the Pons Sublicius Bridge, fending off the Etruscan army while his comrades destroyed the bridge behind him, preventing the enemy from entering the city. Mutius Scaevola, the young Roman who infiltrated the Etruscan camp to assassinate their king, but was captured. To demonstrate Roman courage, he thrust his right hand into fire and burned it, terrifying his enemies. These stories, whether entirely true or embellished with myth, reinvigorated Roman morale and saved the Republic from destruction. After surviving these crises, the Republic could breathe and gradually strengthen its institutions. The consuls remained the highest executive authority, but now the popular assemblies also began gaining influence, councils that passed laws and elected officials. However, the conflict between patricians and plebeians was far from over. It took decades for the plebeians to gradually gain access to high offices. A turning point came with the Law of the 12 Tables around 451 BCE. Before this, laws were unwritten and controlled by the aristocracy, leading to abuses. But under public pressure, the laws were inscribed on bronze tablets and displayed in the forum for all to see. These tablets marked the beginning of the concept of the rule of law in Rome, laws that bound everyone, even the patricians. During this period, Rome slowly transformed from a simple city into a growing power. The republican system, with all its contradictions and challenges, laid the foundation for Rome's expansion across Italy. But a long road still lay ahead, one filled with wars, treaties, and political reforms. Having overcome its initial crises, the Roman Republic was now on a path of growth. No longer just a city along the Tiber, it was rapidly expanding its influence across Italy. But this expansion did not come without war and bloodshed. In the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, Rome became embroiled in a series of conflicts with neighboring tribes and city-states. Various enemies surrounded Rome: the Etruscans to the north, the Latins in the central regions, and the warlike Samnites in the southern Apennine Mountains. Any one of these foes could have destroyed the fledgling republic, but the Romans possessed something others lacked: organization, discipline, and an unyielding will to survive. One of the most pivotal moments of this era was the Latin Wars. Rome, once part of the Latin League, gradually became its dominant power. Around 340 BCE, war broke out between Rome and its former allies. In the end, Rome emerged victorious, but instead of annihilating its enemies, it employed a shrewd policy, granting citizenship or formal alliances to conquered cities. This strategy ensured that each victory laid the groundwork for the next, steadily expanding Rome's network of allies. Yet the greatest threat to the Republic during this period came from an unexpected direction: the Gauls. In 390 BCE, some sources say 387, Gallic warriors led by Brennus invaded Rome. The Roman army suffered a crushing defeat at the Battle of the Allia, and the city fell almost entirely into Gallic hands. According to legend, the Gauls entered Rome but faced heroic resistance from the defenders on the Capitoline Hill. It is even said that the sacred geese of Juno's temple alerted the Romans to a sur. Ultimately, the Romans convinced the invaders to leave, but only after paying a massive ransom in gold. As the Gauls weighed the gold, Brennus reportedly threw his sword onto the scales and uttered the famous words, "Vae victis," woe to the vanquished. The defeat was humiliating for Rome, but it had an unintended consequence. The Romans realized that survival required a stronger army and more formidable defenses. The new Servian wall was built during this period, and the Roman army underwent rapid reforms to ensure such a disaster would never happen again. After this, the Republic entered the Samnite Wars, a series of grueling conflicts against the fierce Samnite tribes in the south. The fighting was brutal, but Rome ultimately prevailed, gaining control over much of Italy. By the end of the 3rd century BCE, the Roman Republic had either directly annexed or skillfully brought under its influence nearly the entire Italian peninsula. These extensive alliances prepared the Romans to face even greater enemies, such as Carthage in North Africa. But that is a story for another day. Looking back at these early centuries, we can see how the Roman Republic was built on a foundation of ideas and hard-earned lessons. Hatred of monarchy, which led to power being divided among institutions. The rule of law, established with the 12 Tables. A policy of alliance and citizenship, turning enemies into friends. The Romans were a people who learned from their defeats. Humiliation at the hands of the Gauls, losses in battle, and internal uprisings only made them stronger. What began in 509 BCE, the fall of a king and the birth of a republic, not only changed Rome's destiny, but also became a model that continues to inspire nations to this day. This was the dawn of the Roman Republic, the story of a people who rose from a small city to lay the foundations of one of history's greatest civilizations.